I arrived, and within 3 years he had 3 children. I had 3 children, 3 boys. For 2 reasons. One was to make sure that we learned a little bit of Italian. They sent both Corrado and I to Italy to stay with our grandmother, Maria Celesta. It was easier for them not to have us around, so off we went to Italy. 1937. Unfortunately, 2 years later, my father was arrested here and interned in the Isle of Man. He was arrested like many others because they weren't naturalised British. He made the most of it, obviously. It was very difficult for my mother because she was left here on her own. So that was the first bad thing that happened to the family. And the other thing was that the war went on for 5 years, so it took, altogether we hadn't seen our parents for 9 years. And we were very close to the front and casino, the casino battle. We live only about 24 kilometres away. I actually virtually remember the American fortresses flying past our house on their way to bomb Monte Cassino. That's quite famous. And the town of Cassino was completely destroyed. And at that time my adventure sort of started, really, because the Germans came in when Italy didn't surrender, but I think they did surrender to the Allies, and the Germans took umbrage to this, so they occupied the country and included our house as well. So we were given 1 room in the house and they took over the rest of it. And it was one SS officer in charge, but most of the troops that were there were of Austrian origin. And they were quite reasonable compared to what the Germans might have been. So we used to join the queue for the food during the day, and occasionally 1 or 2 of them would disappear to the front. But eventually we were evacuated from our house because things got pretty bad around the casino, and the Allies were about to break through. So they evacuated the whole area, including our area, which is nowhere near casino actually. There's a mountain range separating the place. So they put us on a lorry, my grandmother and the 2 of us, and we headed northwards. And the first place that we stopped at was a town called Ferentino, which is just outside Frosinone, which is it's a provincia. And we ran into some friends there who helped us. They had rented a house outside Ferentino, and they decided to sit there and wait for the Allies to come through. Unfortunately for us, one of the ladies included in this group spoke fluent English. So whenever the Allies came through, we were able to meet them and ask them if they could help us. So they said, well, we have a special group of people that do that for us. It was called UNRRA, UNRRA. And they had fleets of lorries and stuff like that, and they transported refugees back to their homes. That was our hope. But as we were going through Cassino, we realised they were taking us in the wrong direction. So they said, they apologised and said, I'm sorry, we can't take you to where your home is because it's an infected area. So we ended up on an open train, and eventually ended up in the toe of Italy. And after a 9-day journey with open carriages in the middle of June, we eventually arrived at our destination. They dropped us off in a small seaside resort in the province of Cosenza on the western side of the Mediterranean, in a little town called Cittadella del Capo. And there again we were very fortunate because we ran into some very nice people who helped us out. And we had a small room to ourselves, and we obviously had no money and we were starving. So I was only about, I suppose, around 10 at the time, 10 or 11. Corrado was a year or so younger than me. We used to take on little jobs around the town to try and gather up some money. Eventually, these people were very nice to us. After I think it was 2 years, we managed to get back to our village again, to our village home. So during that period we approached some authorities and explained that we were wishing to be repatriated to Northern Ireland. And this is an interesting part here now. Mm-hmm. Just before that time, we were contacted by the authorities to say that we had to spend like a quarantine period in a place called Aversa. And this was where the asylum. And during that period, we were there for nearly over 40 days. We were approached one day by an officer, and he asked some questions. He said, "Are you by any chance Angelo Morelli's sons?" And we said, "Yes." He says, "Our commanding officer here has heard of you, he's seen your names, and he would like to talk to you." So he took us up to his office, and we confirmed that we were Angelo Morelli's sons. Mm-hmm. And he said, "I'm going to try and help you. My name is Cunningham." He was an ex-town clerk at Portchester Town Hall. So he was very true to his word. He arranged transport, and eventually, over a slow train journey back to England, where we ran into some cousins of my father who picked us up and looked after us for a little while before we were actually ended back into Northern Ireland again. I'll never forget it because it was a bit of an adventure in a way. My uncle Mario Morelli, he was a first cousin of my father's. He was pretty well off, and instead of taking us home by rail and road, he flew us home. At that time civil planes were only starting to fly. Mm-hmm. So we were in a 10-seater plane, double wings, which actually landed in the Isle of Man to refuel. And our parents, we saw the faces of our parents again after 9 years, mm-hmm. My young brother. So that was more or less my adventures.